Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel here. So as you know, I've been doing this Amazon series where I take a look at Amazon parts and then I put them together and I build a PC for a specific price. Now these PCs are theoretical and I don't actually build them. I just look at the parts and prices and then I piece them together and just sort of consider which parts I myself would put in these computers if I had the set amounts of money and was looking to buy a PC. So these are just theoretical considerations from someone that's worked with PCs for 85% of his life. And so today we are actually looking at the $200 Amazon PC. Now the margins are getting thin. This is very difficult to put together, and so I haven't actually put it together, as you can see. And I'll explain my reasoning in a moment, but at the $200 price point, you can't go all new anymore. It's just not going to happen unless you end up with like a Celeron processor or something like that, which in some cases can be okay, but not for the kinds of PCs that we are trying to build, for the PCs that have to play games and have to have somewhat productivity, functionality, and are just good general PCs. And so this is the first video in the series that has a renewed part, or in this case a bunch of renewed parts. But I think that's just the only way that you would be able to do it if you're building a PC under $300. And so this PC, as you can see, has some decent specs, but as it says, it is refurbished, it is renewed, but the good thing is it comes with a warranty. It says this product is refurbished, fully functional, and in excellent condition, backed by the 90-day Amazon renewed guarantee. And if your PC is going to work for 90 days and you pay $110 for it, $111, then it's probably going to keep working for at least a couple of months to a year to 2 years, however long it needs to work for. It's probably going to work for quite a while. And so let me explain a little bit why I chose this PC now that the explanation of the refurbished pod of the explanation is finished. And the reason I chose this PC is, instead of parsing out and building a bunch of individual components as I have been doing in this series, I've decided to go with a refurbished Optiplex. Now, as you know, well, I guess most of you should know, an Optiplex is an office PC really, but it's one that is, you can still buy Optiplexes new, but people tend to buy these second-hand or refurbished. And these make pretty good bases for computers, but they do have drawbacks as well, and we'll speak about that in a moment. I'm going to speak about the specs, and then I'll speak about the drawbacks to these systems. And so, yeah, as I was saying, people tend to buy these and basically just put a graphics card in there, maybe put an SSD in, as we are going to be doing, and then they are ready to go. They have a fully functional gaming PC, and for a pretty good price normally. Now, a lot of people on Amazon and on eBay and on Newegg or whatever do this and then add a markup and sell it. So that's sort of their business. They buy these cheaper Optiplexes, sometimes not ones as new as this, because this isn't new per se, but it does support DDR4 memory, and it has a sixth gen i5 processor, which isn't amazing, but it's better than older processors that you might find on some of these computers. And so this one specifically, to get into the specs, this is called a Dell Optiplex 740 Mini Tower. It's called a Mini Tower because it's not super tall, and it's not super wide in terms of the width, and of course it's not super long as well. But it's not small form factor per se, it's just not large. And so the specs for this one, Intel Core, it just says Core, Intel Core, okay, Core 6th generation i5. So it's a Core i5 6th generation, 6500 processor, 8 gigs of DDR4 RAM, 1 terabyte hard drive, and Windows 10 Pro. And that's another thing that you get with these most of the time is an activated copy of Windows 10 or 11. And you should be able to upgrade to Windows 11 anyway, if your CPU supports it. I'm not sure if this one does. To read what the listing says, this pre-owned product has been professionally inspected, tested, and cleaned by Amazon qualified vendors. Now, a lot of YouTubers will buy these and actually check them out, and usually they are quite clean. They do work, but there are drawbacks to these products as well, which we'll get into in a moment. This product is in excellent condition. The screen and body show no signs of cosmetic damage visible from 12 inches away. Now, I don't know why from 12 inches away, but that's fine. This product will have a battery that exceeds 80% capacity relative to new. I'm not sure what that means in this case. That's a little bit of a strange thing to put in because this doesn't use a battery. I mean, I guess it has a CMOS battery, but I doubt that they're talking about that. So they might be talking about the power supply, but I don't think that applies here. Accessories may not be original, but will be compatible and fully functional. Product may come in generic box. Now, I believe these come with keyboard and mice, but they come with pieces of crap. Like, you can just, throw those away again. It's e-waste really, and you're not going to use it for gaming. Lastly, this product is eligible for a replacement or refund within 90 days of receipt if it does not work as expected. So that's a good thing that Amazon is willing to have you refund or replace these. So that's just gives you that little bit of security when you're making a purchase like this. So I'm going to scroll down and take a good look at the specs here. They don't say much, but we know what's in this. The processor, 3.2 gigahertz, i5 6500. Now, I believe the i5 6500 is a 4-core, 4-thread CPU, so it's not the best in terms of modern speed and modern functionality, but it is still going to be okay for games, and it's going to be okay for older games specifically, but you'll be able to play newer games at decent frame rates as well. RAM, it comes with 8 gig DDR4. Now, this doesn't say whether it's dual channel or single channel, but usually it is single channel, and that means that you will be able to upgrade that 8 gig stick to 16 gig in the future if you wish to do that, because having an 8 gig stick it's okay in terms of RAM size. It's a little bit outdated. You will need to upgrade it, but you will be able to play games with 8 gigs. The only problem is, well, not the only problem, but one of the main problems is that your frame times aren't going to be super smooth, and a lot of games will be actually visibly laggy just because of that single channel RAM. So keep in mind, you're going to have to eventually spend another $20-30 to get either a better kit of RAM or just another 8 gig stick. But do keep in mind, this processor isn't super new, and it probably doesn't support fast speeds anyway. And then hard drive, 1 terabyte. So this doesn't come with an SSD, which is a problem for gaming these days. You can still game from hard drives, and I do still do it because I've got so many games, but it does slow down the loading. Firstly, the loading of games. It does affect the frame rate a little bit, and it does make the game feel slower. But a terabyte of space is nice to have, and if you consider doing any sort of productivity work, a terabyte is always nice to have. It's not really enough for productivity, but it's a good starting point, and you'll be able to store a lot of games on this. And if you play older games, it won't really make much of a difference. The rest of this doesn't really matter much. It says integrated card, so I assume the 6500 has some form of display, but I don't think it's got an APU. It's probably just functional in terms of running Windows. Yeah, and then it just comes with Windows 10, 4 core, doesn't say how many threads, but I believe it's probably 4 threads, and it has that hard drive. So That's it for the specs. If you look at the reviews, it says 3.7 stars out of 5 from 25 ratings. That's not a bad overall review. I mean, it's almost 4 stars, so it's above average, let's say that. So that's relatively, relatively, it just makes you think it might be a good purchase to do. And with that said, let's talk about the negatives with a not a pre-built, but a Optiplex office style PC like this that has proprietary parts and not necessarily much space for improvement or custom components. So first off, let's talk about the case. The front here isn't too bad. It has a decent I/O with an SD card reader, which you don't see so much on PCs now, but this is an office computer. It has an audio jack combined and 4 USBs, with 2 of them being USB 3s. So that's actually pretty good, and it has a DVD-ROM as well. And then apart from that, let's take a look at the back. Now, this is where you can start to see some issues in terms of proprietary functionality and, the possibility of integrating custom components. Let's start by looking at the I/O shield, for instance. You can see this I/O shield is fixed and not removable and not replaceable, which means the motherboard is going to be non-proprietary, and it is an odd shape with these components. It almost has like a normal shape, and then it has like an extra piece that comes out, and that means that you can't upgrade this motherboard if you want to keep this computer in the long term. And sometimes you can't even upgrade the CPU because the way that they either solder it onto the motherboard, which I don't think is the case with this, or they just make it really difficult to actually get out and replace. And it's aging components anyway, so what are you going to replace it with in that socket specifically? So that's something to keep in mind. Looking at the back I/O here, that's quite good. You have your your Ethernet port, another 2 USB 2s, and another 4 USB 3s. You have your display outs, your display port outs, and your HDMI outs, which for us, we aren't going to use this, but it just means that this CPU does have a relative collection of display out options through the motherboard. Looking at the PCI Express brackets here, you can see again, this is not a normal sort of proprietary kind of functionality with this, and this is custom to Optiplexes. And so what that means is, yes, you can add a graphics card to this, but you won't be able to change the case, which to some people isn't an issue, but it's something to keep in mind if you are looking at a computer like this. Finally, we take a look at the power supply. Again, not a proprietary power supply. This is one of those elongated ones that's sort of squeezed into the case. It's not as big as those normal power supplies. I forget the abbreviations for those now, but usually these are rated pretty well. And in this case, I'm not specifically sure about the size of it, but it should be around 400 watts or so. And again, Dell tend to use weird power connectors in their computers, so you won't necessarily be able to replace this, which is something to keep in mind. If you are thinking about buying something like this, do your research on the power supply, see if it can support the graphics card that you want to put in, see what the wattage is, what the rating is, and whether it will be replaceable in the future, because these are important things to think about. But with all of that said, let's take a look at what we're going to be adding to this computer to make it more gaming, viable, and not just an office computer, but a computer that can do office work, 3D work, gaming, and editing functionality. Just a good general computer. So firstly, we are going to be taking a look at the graphics card that I would add to this. And I would add the RX 580 2048 SP version. This is technically just a better RX 570, but it's so close in performance. It's like between 5 to 10% difference. So for the price, just go for this. It doesn't really have much of a difference on FPS, maybe 2 or 3 FPS. So it's really not worth it to go for the proper RX 580 if you want to save a few bucks, that is. Now again, I haven't actually done the research on whether the power supply would actually be able to support this card, because the website itself doesn't actually say the wattage of the power supply or the rating of it. So take this with a pinch of salt. This is just a visualization and a sort of idea of what a graphics card could be like with this. But if you are scared of that power limitation, you can always go for something that doesn't require power, something like a RX 6500 XT, something like that. But you are going to spend a little bit more money on that, and I had to make this work with the budget, and that's why I went for this. Now you can see this card does draw around 150 watts, so it is quite power hungry, and it recommends a 400 watt power supply, which if you can't match that with a computer like the Optiplex, you should be careful of purchasing something like that. So all I'm saying is, if you are actually looking at purchasing these parts, make sure that the power supply in the specific Optiplex that you're buying is going to have enough power to support your graphics card. This is very important, because you don't want to burn out that power supply, and you don't want to destroy your whole computer or your graphics card. With that said, this is going to perform quite well in terms of games, and you'll be able to play anything at HD at least medium graphics. For a final part, let's take a look at a SSD. So I would add this as well, and this does push us just over that $200 threshold, but not by much, and it's going to just add a lot to this system, because it's going to add 240 gigs of SSD storage, which is enough for a couple games. So your favorite games that you play every day, you put on this. And then games that you just play now and then, you put on the hard drive, or your productivity work, your YouTube videos, your 3D models, your scripts, whatever it is that you do, you put that on the hard drive and you make backups. That's important as well. But the point is, for only $15 extra, you can get a decent SSD. Now, this is not going to be the fastest thing in the world, but you won't expect it to at this price. But it is going to offer quick loading times for your games, and it is going to be a lot better for running Windows with in general. So those are the parts that I would pick for this computer. I think that it's going to make quite a good gaming computer. I mean, for $200 you can't complain much. To get an HD gaming computer for that sort of money is ridiculous, and it's incredible that it is even possible. One thing that I didn't mention with this is, I think you might get a screen with this computer, but I'm not 100% sure, because it says the screen and body show no signs of cosmetic damage. And the other ones did sort of mention a screen. So you might get a screen with this, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But regardless, the price is so low, it doesn't matter if you get one or not. And even if you do, it's probably not going to be a very good one. It'll just be some sort of dull office screen or something like that. So yeah. So anyway, those are the parts that I've chosen. I think it's going to make quite a good computer, especially for the money. And with that said, let's look at the pricing guide and see the details of all the prices for these components. Let's do it. Okay, welcome back everyone. So now we're taking a look at the 300 USD Amazon Gaming PC build guide pricing sheet. And of course, we've already established the not pre-built, the office system that we're going with. We've said that we will be adding an SSD and a GPU. So we are going with the Dell Optiplex 740 Mini Tower. It has a 6th Gen 6500 i5, 4 cores, 4 threads. It's got, I think, single channel 8 GB of DDR4 RAM. It's got a 1 TB hard drive, It didn't even say which speed, so just assume it's quite slow, and it has Windows 10. And it is renewed, so it is refurbished. That cost $111 on special, but I think normally it's like $120, so it's not far away from the special price. And it's a fantastic price, to be honest with you. It's a better price than what you would get a system like that for second hand without it being refurbished, without it being cleaned or anything. So it's a really good price. And then we're adding a SSD to it. We're adding the Patriot Burst Elite 240 gig SSD for another $15. That's a good price as well. And it's just going to add that little bit of speed to Windows and the favorite games that we want to play. Lastly, we are adding a GPU to it. It is the SR Schronera RX 580 8 gig 2048 SP version. Now this is going to work quite well with this system, I think, and we will be able to play any game on HD, most of them at high graphics, so pretty excited for that. Of course the RAM is going to affect the frame rate and the frame time, but we can always add more RAM later. Extras, we already have a hard drive. I don't even think we can add a different CPU cooler to this, so no extras, and it comes to a total of $216. Now if you want to stick to $200, remove the SSD, but I do really recommend you go with an SSD, even if it is just 128 gigs. Just for Windows, it's still going to make a massive difference. So please consider an SSD. And as I said before, make sure that the system that you go with, the Office PC that you go with, has a power supply that can handle the graphics card that we want to put into it. That's very important. You don't want to buy something that can't handle the, let's say, 150 watts that it will draw. So please do your research on that. So total price $216. It's a fantastic price for a system that's going to play games like this. And the funny thing is, this is actually going to do better than the $300 system that we put together, but you don't have much upgrade room with this. You can't change the case. You can't change the motherboard. You might be able to change the CPU and RAM and graphics card, but that's about it. So if you purchase a system like this, just know it's going to look the way it looks, and that is just how it is. So yeah, but anyway, $216, really good price, pretty happy with it. Let's do some imaginary benchmarks. I'm just going to get some benchmarks that someone else has done and just check how well these parts have done in those sort of benchmarks. And as I always say, these aren't real benchmarks that I'm doing. I don't actually have these parts. They are just theoretical benchmarks, just to give you an idea of what the performance would be like. So let's do that. Stick with me and let's do some benching. Okay, welcome back to the video here, and we are getting into the theoretical benchmarks. Again, I just got this off a YouTuber who had these exact parts and posted the gameplay of it, and of course had the overlay for Afterburner on, so that we can see the frame rate and the temperatures and the usage and all of that. So they don't all have the same sort of gizmos on, so we can't see in this one, for instance, the frame time or the average frame rate or whatever, but we can see the frame rate for this specific screenshot, and it is 60 FPS, and this game is of course Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is the newest Tomb Raider game, and it is on high graphics, so not maxed out but high, which 60 FPS for that for a relatively new game is quite impressive. And this just shows the potential of this computer. Now, some games are going to use technologies that are a little bit out of reach for this computer, but you can definitely game on it. Next one here we have Warzone 2, Call of Duty Warzone 2, and this is a game which is a little bit more difficult to run because it's a quad-core CPU, and the graphics card isn't really made for this level of gaming, and so this is 1080p minimum, and we are just getting 40 FPS in this frame, but overall average is 46 FPS, which is playable but not super competitive. And of course, there's no more leeway to turn those settings down. But I do think you would be able to turn the textures up because of the 8 gig video buffer on this graphics card. And so you would still get the game to look quite nice. And if you're happy playing between 40 to 60 FPS, it's definitely playable. Next up, we have Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is the new Spider-Man game. And this is running on 1080p high, getting 51 frames in this shot, 56 average. So it's sort of similar to Warzone, where it's a little bit of a newer game. This graphics card's a little bit older, but it's still very playable, and these would be console equivalent graphics and performance. For $200, that's incredible if you think about it. I mean, what does an Xbox cost? I need to check what an Xbox costs. But let's say in South Africa, where I am, an Xbox Series S would be new. It would be about 7,000 Rand, which is about $450. So more than twice the cost of this system. And this is pretty much the graphics that you're going to get on it. So yeah, it's something to think about for sure. Next up, we have a game that's a little bit difficult to run, and a game that is struggling a little bit on this computer, and it is Hogwarts Legacy. And the reason this is struggling is not necessarily because of the graphics card. It is because of the CPU. This game doesn't like quad-core CPUs, and it needs a little bit more power. But again, if you are okay with a cinematic experience, this is running on, I think, medium, then... And this game is quite cinematic. It's not like you need fast reflexes or anything. So if you're okay with gaming like that, then this would be an okay experience. But myself, I wouldn't recommend it. Lastly here, we have Counter-Strike Go, and this is our esports sort of example. And we're getting around 110 frames per second in this screenshot, which is really good. It's more than competitive, but it's a little bit disappointing. I would think we would get around 200. Maybe if you turn down the anti-aliasing or something like that, it would be a little bit better. But anyway, anything above 80 FPS is more than competitive enough to play with your friends and play games like these at really good frame rates. Oh, and we have another one actually. We have Assassin's Creed Origins, which is another pretty recent AAA game, and it's running at 53 frames per second at high graphics. So specific games run better than others, and I think that's to be expected with older technology. But will it game? Definitely. I don't think, yeah, that's the last one. So that's it for the benchmarks, the theoretical benchmarks. It does pretty well. I mean, if you consider it's $200, $215 to be specific, but it does really, really well. And I think if you add that dual channel memory, it's going to do even better. It's going to get smoother frame times, and you'll probably hit that I was going to say 60. That 60 FPS target most of the time. So yeah, can you game on $200 if you're okay with a refurbished computer, mix of refurbished and new parts? You definitely can, and I'm happy to say that it's looking better than what I expected for the money. So yeah, you can definitely do it. As I explained previously, consider upgrading the RAM and make sure that the power supply can handle whatever graphics card you choose to put into the system. It's not a bad idea to buy old Dells and old Asuses and old desktop computers, desktop office computers. It's fine, you can buy those. Just make sure that the power supplies support whatever card you want to put in. I've said that like 4 times, but it's very important. So yeah, this PC did quite well, pretty happy with it, and I think you will be too if you really are on such a tight budget. And I think most people that are on such a tight budget will aim to play things like Valorant, Counter-Strike, Rocket League, those esports kind of games, and this PC will absolutely crush those games. So I'm happy to say that it's definitely possible on a budget. Yeah, that's going to be it for the video. Thanks for watching through if you've gotten to here, and hopefully you are also happy with the components that I've picked out for this. This was a bit of a challenge because it's not easy to work with $200 and get something that can play games, but this definitely could, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. If you would do something different, let me know what you would do differently, what parts you would put in, and in general, let me know what you think of this series, what you think of these videos. Hopefully you enjoy it, and hopefully my videos are getting a little bit better. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.